Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm looking at the trainers in Pokemon TCG Pocket. Again, I ranked all of them, or at least talked about all of them when the game first came out, but there are some more new ones from Mythical Island that I haven't really talked about just in terms of comparing them to the other trainers, and this also changes the value of previous trainers that were out from the beginning of the game, either through promos or genetic apex. So with that out of the way, I have things grouped into two categories here, mainly the cards that can go in any deck and the cards that can go in some specific decks. And the cards will be grouped within tiers, though these two tiers of B tier, good to consider is like a general tier for these first set of cards we'll be looking at, and then amazing in some decks is another B tier. I feel like if a card can't be in every deck, it can't be that good. I mean, some of the decent trainers are still some of the like top probably five cards in the game that would be in A tier here. Even in B tier, they're super good. So, or at least pretty good. We'll see exactly how the tier list plays out though. But the first card we have here is Pokeball, searching for any basic Pokemon. Well, you don't search, you get a random basic from your deck. It's obviously very good. Played in every deck in the game. Essentially, if you're playing a deck with only two basics, like the Articuno EX deck, which is a deck that um, isn't really played that much now. I don't think I saw it a lot for a while, but that doesn't necessarily play two copies. But getting a random basic from your deck is so good. It's one of the only consistency boosting cards in the game. And consistency boosting cards that are trainers are insane. Consistency boosting Pokemon like say Chatot, Sigilyph, or Meowth, I think are decent. I think they're a little bit underrated, but ultimately they have flaws as they require energy attachments and you to actually draw into them or get them with something like Pokeball. But Pokeball is really a two of inclusion in every single deck in Pokemon TCG Pocket, and everyone has it for free as well, guaranteed. You just get it. So yeah, it's just really good. Then we have Pokemon Flute up next. This is a newer item. Pokemon Flute is a card that allows you to put a basic Pokemon from your opponent's discard pile onto their bench. This is a card I haven't really seen played much. I know it has synergy with a handful of cards, just a small handful though. It has synergy with like Pidgeot EX, I guess the regular Pidgeot as well. Theoretically, with Sabrina, which is like the baby Pidgeot, and also with something like maybe Raichu, this like certain spread Pokemon, but it's not great. So I think this card's kind of bad. It's not terrible, but it's not a card I'd really recommend you play that often. I could even see it in the C tier situational, but I'm going to put in the D tier. Definitely not one that I'd recommend. This is just like really niche, or it is bad in most decks. I guess a better spread Pokemon or snipe Pokemon would be Hitmonlee, which sees play. Then X Speed. X Speed's good. We'll talk about Leaf as well. Let's actually just talk about Leaf and X Speed together, so we'll get to that later. Hand Scope is an interesting item where you look at your opponent's hand. I think this one's a little underrated, but it's bad. It's not. I haven't really seen people play it for a long time. At the beginning, people just played it because they had it and didn't have that many other cards, but it's pretty bad. Um, I'll put it in the bad tier. Um, I think it's potentially better than Pokemon Flute, to be honest. Like it's a card that I think people just value essentially not at all. But getting your knowledge of your opponent's hand can be super useful to know if they're hiding a Sabrina or a Giovanni. Yeah, those are like the big two that can really completely swing the game, and then you can either one be prepared for or two red card them. It doesn't necessarily actually let you do anything. Like if you see your opponent's hand, you might not be able to make any different plays that will actually help you, but there are times when you're doing what feel like 50-50 plays on whether or not your opponent has a card that you need to get rid of from their hand, or that you need to, I guess, address from the hand by countering it by maybe retreating and waiting or something like that. So it's a card that is usable. It's still not very good though. A lot of the time it's pretty much useless. And then also I'll talk about Pokédex. Pokédex, you look at the its top three cards of your deck, and yeah, that's it. That's all you do. It's pretty bad. I feel like yes, being able to know what the cards are coming up in your deck is nice, and theoretically you can shuffle your deck with Pokeball or there are some attacks that shuffle your deck. I believe Chatot does, and then Caterpie also does. but ultimately, like that's not really something that ever comes up. And also because like you definitely want a Pokeball if you have Pokeball, so um, and you can't decide to not shuffle your deck or just shuffle your deck with Pokeball. You could just play it or not play it. So that's pretty bad. And then also, reshuffling your deck hardly does anything. It just changes odds a tiny bit. And then you also have the like having the extra knowledge. What does that do? I don't know. It doesn't do that much. It allows you to do a few things like play more into certain strategies or avoid certain strategies or routes of play, I guess. But ultimately, if you see that your attacker is not in the next few cards or is definitely in the next few cards, um, you can change a little bit, but ultimately, you probably make a lot of the same plays, almost all the same plays without this card, and it doesn't do anything beyond that. So I'm going to put this in the never play this category here. Yeah, I mean, if you really want to, you can play whatever you want, but it's definitely a card I would not recommend you play. And we got Potion. There are 7 cards you start off with, which are Pokédex, Handscope, Pokeball, Potion, Red Card, Professor's Research, and X Speed. The worst two are definitely Handscope and Pokédex, but um, Potion is one of those, and it's pretty solid. It's probably a card I'd say it's between A and B tier here, definitely. It allows you to heal 20 from any of your Pokemon, 20 damage, so that's pretty nice if you can play multiple or in certain situations, but it's a little niche. It's not the most niche, but I put it in good to consider. I think like it's a card I'd recommend a lot as maybe a one of in most decks, but I know a lot of people don't love Potion. I think at least based on lists that I've seen and what I've played against, it's good. Ultimately, supporters are stronger than items. I don't think there are any supporters that are essentially identical to items. The closest thing would be, oh wait, no, yeah, Leaf is directly objectively better than X Speed, and it's twice as good, but that's not like it seems like it's twice as good, but it's not. We'll get to that. But it is better. And then Erica is better than Potion, but oh yeah, well, I mean we'll talk about Erica later as well. But Potion's a good card that is nice in a lot of decks, but if your opponent's one-shotting you, then it doesn't matter at all. So if you look at the meta game, you have Mewtwo EX, which is one-shotting most things, and certainly two-shotting them, even with Potion. And then if it's not one-shotting, and then you also have Gyarados EX, which is a really interesting deck to talk about with Potion because Gyarados EX is the main Pokemon, which does big damage, but not necessarily one-shotting everything. For example, not one-shotting Mewtwo EX or Charizard EX, but is 10 to 20 short. And so your opponent can Greninja or Druddigon, but ultimately those will probably be going into or on their turn, so then you can't actually potion before they attack you. So ultimately potion's a bit niche, but it is a good card. Red card is honestly in my opinion C tier. It's situational because and C tier is not bad. C tier and above are good and D and below is bad is pretty much just what I'm gonna say, I think. But C tier's all right, but Red card, your opponent shuffles their hand to their deck, draws 3. It's a card that I've seen. I used to see a ton. Now I don't see it that much. Ultimately, it can be used to punish players for holding back and cards in their hand. Like, for example, you could hold back stage 2 because you don't want to reveal to your opponent that you have it, but that puts you at a massive risk of being red carded and losing that entire opportunity to actually, play the game and play your card, but it's more so the threat of red card. But that still is, I'd say, part of the value. Though in that situation, you don't necessarily even need to play the card. You get value by the card existing, but not even necessarily being in your deck. But if no one ever plays it, then people will start to pull back their cards. Then you get this situation where you have the cycle of people playing and accounting for red card or not accounting for it. So then it's like, okay, it certainly can be decent, but in terms of how good it actually is, a lot of the time, if you have, so let's say you're playing a base, I guess, I'm trying to think, the best decks, all of stage twos, or a lot of the best decks. Pikachu EX does not. So against Pikachu EX, this is like super bad because it just increases their odds if they don't have Pikachu EX of getting it, and if they do have it, then it increases their odds or it allows them to potentially get more basics to just play down. And in the late game, it can be nice to punish, to like shrink your opponent's big hand, but is it that good? You're already later in the game, so it's probably not that good. Also, it draws your opponent a bunch of cards. So they see more cards, they'll probably, it's like theoretically good against stage 2 decks as they're setting up if they have good hands, but a lot of the time you're red carding them to maybe a hand that's one card smaller than it is now. Sometimes it's the same size, in which case you're just kind of gambling on a hand read, or you could play hand scope. As I said, hand scope's like not that good. So red card I think is it's all right. Putting it just one tier above hand scope and Pokemon Flute, or Poke Flute. I don't remember what it is because I haven't played it, but I haven't really played it much at least. But it's okay. It feels a little low, but I couldn't put it in B tier. I imagine there are some people who think it'll be much better, but I think a lot of people agree that it does go in this tier. Then we have the supporter cards that are general supporters. Professor's Research, draw two. It's probably the best card in the game. I'd put it above Pokeball. Comparing it to like Pokemon and stuff is really hard, and even some of these general trainers, it's a little hard. But or sorry, specific trainers to the general trainers is a little hard. But Professor's Research is pretty clearly an A tier card or an S tier card, and I'll put it above Pokeball. I will be ordering these. Definitely an amazing card that you should be playing two copies of in every single deck. There's no deck that desperately needs to be playing supporters every single turn, like specific ones. I mean, you can only be playing two supporters, so you're probably not going to hit it turn one. And also, Professor's Research, turn one going first, really nice. Obviously, you could burn it and then have like a big hand and then get red carded or something like that. But I mean, that's a problem that isn't actually a problem. It means you could just play it after the red card. So it's like two different situations, both of which are good. So Professor's Research is super insane. Then you have Blue next up, which is kind of like Potion. This is a supporter where you take 10 less damage during your next turn. All of your Pokemon, including if you get Sabrina or your bench Pokemon or whatever, it's an effect on you and your board. It's not an effect on just one Pokemon, but I think this card's pretty situational. I'm going to put it in C tier. It's very situational. I don't see this card played really at all, but I don't think it's necessarily bad. It just depends on the metagame. It's truly a card that is very metagame dependent, even more so than Potion, but I don't think it's a terrible card. I think it's okay. Yeah, not too much to say about it. If you really want to get into the details of like what is good against, you can look at the math. For example, Mewtwo EX Mirror, it's good. It can be countered by Giovanni as well, which is a card that a lot of decks do play. But yeah, definitely an okay card, but not great. And I would say red card is noticeably better than blue, I guess. But I mean, I just really don't see red card that much either. Then we have X speed and Leaf. I said I get to X speed. It's an item. You reduce the retreat cost of your active Pokemon by one colorless, and or maybe just one. I don't remember if it's says colorless. And then you have Leaf, which reduces it by two, and it's a supporter. X speed is better than Leaf. I'd say X Speed is an A tier card. It's really good in a lot of decks, and it can be stacked to be the same value as Leaf, and it is not a supporter, which is quite nice. Obviously, it's being a supporter, it's just one card, which is good, and so like I'm definitely someone who likes supporters, but and I originally thought Leaf was like really bad, and then I thought it was really good, and now I'm thinking like it's okay. I think it's probably a B tier card, Leaf, because it's not bad. It's certainly, I mean, if we didn't have X speed, Leaf would be borderline S tier, I think. But we obviously do have X speed, which is really good, and they kind of fight each other. I would say X speed was borderline S tier before Leaf came out. It was so good in so many decks and allowed for so many more opportunities as the switch replacement from the regular TCG going to Pocket. And it most Pokemon have one retreat that are like support Pokemon, like Ralts and Curlia and Chatot, I think, has one, and Pikachu. That's not really a support Pokemon, but it kind of is. A regular Pikachu. Pikachu EX is not a support Pokemon. And Zapdos E. Oh, wait, no. Zapdos EX is it? I think it's one. Um, Most do. It's more so an outlier when they don't. So X Speed works with most decks very well. Leaf works okay. With three retreat Pokemon, it's really awkward. I think the decks that I've seen a lot play X Speed, and then some play X Speed or Leaf, like one of each. And a handful play 2 Leafs. Leaf's not a bad card. I mean, B tier is pretty good, but it's not the top tier, even like the second to top tier. Then we have Giovanni as a supporter. You do 10 more damage to your points active. This is really good a lot of the time. It can be good just in general. It's not always good. Like ultimately, attacks are doing more than 10 damage, so it's not necessarily saving your turn. But if it is saving your turn, that's huge. So it's really good against, say, if you're using, well, you're not Gyarados EX doesn't use Giovanni, but you could use that against Mewtwo EX. I'm trying to think of specific examples of the math, and I can't really think of any off the top of my head. I can think of like weird ones like Venusaur EX against like a Weezing or something, but I don't even think that deck plays Giovanni. But regardless, Giovanni sees a bunch of play. You can play it in like Pikachu EX for, um, you just want extra damage. Giovanni's good. Giovanni's good in general. I don't know why I'm blanking on examples of its good use cases, but ultimately it's a very good card. Could be useful in like Celebi EX to do have some randomness in it, but it is theoretically quite good. Slash Zapdos EX, very similar kind of similar Pokemon. In terms of when they attack, they're similar Pokemon. And then you can also use it with like Mewtwo EX to one shot a 60 HP Pokemon. Just lots of different use cases, and a card that is very good. Then we have Sabrina. Sabrina is also going to be A tier, and I'm going to put it at the top of A tier. You force your points active to switch. This is, I almost want to put it in S tier. It's obviously annoying, but it's not, it's not that consistently a game-winning card. It's more so a card that will buy you an extra turn, draw out the game a little longer, and potentially give you an opportunity back into the game. But that is still very meaningful. It's kind of like what Blue is kind of supposed to do, and that it can win you games. So it's a card that, and the big plays are when it wins you games, when you force your points active with lots of HP to the bench to then bring up something with lower HP and just knock it out and win. Um, it's a very good card, but it's a card that's also pretty much always good, so that's nice. It's not like the level of the top supporters, but it is very good. Then we're moving on to the more type specific or card specific trainers here. The first one is an item, the rest are supporters, and that's Mythical Slab. If you've heard me talk about Mythical Island and Mythical Slab, you know I love this card. I think it's really insane for Gardevoir decks, so that's going to go in the B tier. Obviously, it's not good in any other deck, and also it doesn't get you Professor's Research, which you'd rather get Professor's Research than um, put it on the bottom and like potentially see a Psychic Pokemon sooner, because Professor's Research could get you that Psychic Pokemon unless you have an extra research. So generally, it's good. It's not always amazing, but it's generally quite good, and it's a card that I've been really impressed by. It's kind of like Pokeball. I'd actually compare it a lot to it. I think it's the most similar card in the game to Mythical Slab, but it's not for every type, right? So ultimately, I can't put it higher than V tier because it's only good in one deck, maybe a few other like rogue decks, but it's still very good in that one deck. Erica is a supporter that I think is a bit situational. I'm going to put in C tier. I'll put it actually above these cards. It's quite good in grass decks when you're tanking hits, but only within certain math. And then in those situations, you might also need potion or some other healing. You obviously have Venusaur EX, which heals, which I've been playing some Venusaur EX, and it's all right. It's not amazing, but it's all right, and it's definitely a fun deck in my opinion. Then you also have like Celebi EX and Executor EX, and those are very good. Erica is not actually that good in those decks. Like originally, I was like, why is this in here? And you use it, and it's okay in those decks. It can be nice and can win you games. Doesn't do that often, but it's like a better potion. It really is why it's played within those decks, and there aren't too many cards you're really looking to play. You could try to add in some like Shout Out or something, but ultimately, Erica, it's decent. It fits well within the grass type in terms of being healing focused, and at some point I'm going to make a video on detailing the types, but ultimately Celebi EX, or ultimately Erica is okay. Um, Good for the type it's in, but not an amazing all-around card. Misty is, I guess it's B tier. Like I'm looking at the tier list. I feel like it should be higher, but Nah, I'll just say B tier. I mean, I think it's obviously a very good card. It's a really controversial card, I feel like, because it's so coin flip dependent, and literally half the time it doesn't do anything. So I don't feel that bad leaving it in B tier here. Obviously, it's really strong in the decks it's in. It kind of defines those decks, but you sometimes get no value out of it, and then sometimes you get insane value and just kind of win on the spot. Now that people aren't playing the solo Articuno EX deck, or at least I'm not seeing it, then and on like on online tournaments, it's definitely being played a lot less. Misty is a card that I mean it's still seeing play with the Gyarados EX deck, and actually can get better value when you get a bunch of heads because Gyarados EX is very expensive with its attack costs and also can discard energy from yourself. But Misty is ultimately a card that is very strong a lot of the time within water decks, but obviously not a card you'd ever use in any other type of deck. Ultimately, I probably need to talk about energy acceleration because all the forms of energy acceleration in Pokemon TCG Pocket, only, as far as I'm aware, only go to the type, like to one specific type. So that's kind of annoying in my opinion. But regardless, so Misty is a card that is game winning, game swinging, game defining, but also game losing if you get unlucky. So um, if this was just accelerate one energy, I think people would it would be a little bit better than it is right now, though not that much better. And then it would also be a card that people wouldn't like. Some people think this card is absurdly broken because they look at it as accelerating multiple energies, but it does that. It does it sometimes, but not super commonly, and a lot of the time it doesn't do anything. So keep that in mind. But it is a very strong card. Blaine is a very good supporter. I mean, it's super situational. It's only good in one deck, and it kind of is the reason that you'd play that deck. I guess I'll put in the top of seat here. You do 30 more with your, was it Magmar, Rapidash, and Ninetales? People, I feel like, don't really play that much Magmar, but Ninetales and Rapidash are two pretty good cards. There's two decent Rapidashes, and Blaine is really important to those cards. And I think it's good. I don't think the deck's great. I think it's decent, and some people like it a lot. I know that, and yeah, not too much else to say about it. Blaine is a deck. It's one of the, if not the only supporters on this list that really is a deck, and that deck's okay. It's not the best. It's not really ever going to be the best, most likely. It's probably not really ever going to be that close to the best. Not like a top tier deck, but it's decent. Then you have Koga here. Koga, I'd actually say a lot of similar things to Blaine. Koga returns either a Muck or Wheezing from your active into your hand. Really just Wheezing. I might be making a video on where I'm going to talk about Koga plus Muck because it's really bad. It's truly a terrible combo because Muck is super expensive, and I mean I guess it's tanky, but Wheezing's a little less tanky, but still decently tanky. And it's a card where you're going to be able to. Like I said, I didn't really mention like Druddigon with the Leaf. So Druddigon's like another tanky wall that you can then switch to the bench. It will not heal up, but you can do something similar, but this has more HP. Wheezing has more HP than Druddigon. But Koga is obviously super situational, specific to one, um, theoretically two cards, but really just one card. Wheezing's ability, that was really nice. Wheezing might be my favorite card in Pocket in terms of card design. I think it's a really fun. But Koga is a card that works really well with it, but it's going to go in the same tier as these other cards. I'll put it. Um, I love this card. I'll put it above Red Carbon and below Erica. That feels all right. No, actually, yeah, I don't know. This is fine. You could, I mean, they are in tiers for a reason. If you want to argue different cards within the tier, you could do that. That's completely fine. But it's good. It's obviously very specific, but it is a cool card. Brock is a card I have not played with Brock yet. I don't know if I played with. There are a few of these cards I haven't played with, but Brock's a card I have not played with, and it seems kind of bad. It accelerates an energy to a Golem or an Onyx, a fighting energy from the energy zone, and that's okay. I mean, obviously it's really good for those Pokemon, but Onyx isn't particularly good, and nor are the Golems. I mean, I guess they're good once they're set up, but you need so much energy, and they're a stage two plus you need a supporter, a specific supporter to get them set up faster, and they're still not super fast. I think Golem's not that good. There's the new Golem from Mythical Island, which is definitely an okay attacker. I mean, include it in my top five stage twos video or single point Pokemon video of stage twos. That section, it's not in the top five stage twos, I don't think, because I'd probably put Charizard above it, and I might put multiple EXs above it. And the stage 2 EXs aren't even that good, but ultimately, Brock's okay, but I don't think it's that good. I'm gonna put it in bad tier. I I mean, it feels kind of weird to be putting it next to Pokemon Flute and um, Hand Scope. Wait, is it what it is? It's not Pokeflute. Yeah, it's Pokemon Flute. Um, like they're not very good cards. But Brock is very niche, and it's not even that good at what it does. I think if this accelerated to the Graveler and the Geodude, I'd definitely bump this up actually a noticeable amount, but it doesn't. So, yeah, I think it's kind of bad. Lieutenant Surge is the next one up, and this is good for mostly for Raichu, the 140 damage for 3 lightning attack within the Pikachu EX deck, though it can be used for other things. I obviously played against a deck where my opponent had like Magneton and Raichu, but it's the new Raichu. They also played like the old Pikachu, which by the way, I think the best Pikachu is definitely the new Pikachu. But I think they got like a bunch of energy on their Raichu, like 12. So that was a thing. But anyways, that's something that isn't useful, right? That's not really useful. It's pretty niche. It's not a bad card, but I'm gonna put it in the bottom of the situational tier. It's very situational. When it's situational and you get those situations, it's insane, and it's in a very good. Actually, no, I'm gonna put it in bad tier. I think it's not a good card. Like it's kind of insane in very niche situations, and it can win you games, and it's in a good deck, but I don't think the card's very good. It's kind of funny, and it can do cool things, but ultimately it's a card that I would not recommend that you focus on as your like as an important card within the deck. It's a card that sitting on the back burner behind Pikachu EX, like if you need to attack once every 5 games with a Lieutenant Surge Raichu combo, it's all right. It can move energy to Electrode and Electabuzz, so maybe I'm undervaluing that a little bit, but they're just okay. I mean, they're decent Pokemon, but Pikachu EX, either you have time to set up or you don't. And if you want to combo and go all in for this one attack, it can win you games, but the amount of damage you do isn't even necessarily enough. So I don't think this card's very good. I'm not a massive fan of the Raichu build. I mean, I think it might be the best for Pikachu, but I think it's like on par with Zebstrika and Electrode. I know a lot of people think it's by far the best, or at least some people do. And it's okay. It's just a decent build. I think Lieutenant Surge is an okay, it's a good card within that deck, but its role is very specific. And yeah, I'm just going to put it in this bad tier. You lose all the energy, and then you can't really power it up again. You compare it with Magneton, but you need multiple different stage ones in play. I mean, you could do it with, I guess, the uh, the Electabuzz, which is a basic but not a super strong card. But it has a use case. Like these cards have use cases, but they are niche. And well, I love Pikachu EX's attack. Raise I'm not gonna be able to raise Lieutenant Surge up that much because of it. It's just so specific. Then we have Budding Expeditioner. When I talked about this card before, I was like super harsh on it. It's a card I haven't really played with much. Obviously, it's a newer card. It's one of the new supporters, along with Leaf and Blue, and it's certainly not as good as those. I mean, it might be as Blue's not great, but Budding Expeditioner is pretty niche. It allows you to scoop. It's like Koga. You scoop up your act. Wait, is it active? I think it is. Does it really matter? Probably not. But yeah, your active UEX to your hand. So that heals it up and switches it out. I think there's potential with like a lot of walling with this because this has more HP than Wheezing. It's not really doing damage. It's kind of a colorless attacker. UEX, its second attack is 3 colorless, and it's a very solid attack. I think it's a little underrated, maybe. I'm not sure if it's actually underrated. I've heard a lot of people say that they don't think it's good, but I know some people think it's really good as well. But I think it's quite good. And Bunny Expeditioner, the attack's 3 energy, the main attack, the colorless one, because the first attack is a psychic energy, and so you're not applying any pressure, unlike the walls of Wheezing and Druddigon applies pressure. It's not um, exactly the same kind of pressure because your opponent does need to be hitting into you, but it still is providing pressure there. And UBX isn't really, if you're accelerating or attaching much energy, it's okay. And then within like a deck focused around UBX, like I mean within Gardevoir, I guess, where you can actually attack with it relatively easily, you don't want a Budding Expeditioner or your MUEX. Like that's not really that good. So Budding Expeditioner, I think, is a card with potential. I'm going to put it in the bottom of situational tier for now. I was originally really harsh to this card, but I think I'm warming up to it a little bit. we need to wait and see a little bit. I mean, UEX does get one-shotted by a good chunk of Pokemon that are played right now, but it will be surviving attacks from Pikachu EX, and you could just loop that for a bunch of turns and buy yourself a lot of time. And so that could be really good. And also, it only has a one retreat cost. So Druddigan and Weezing are walls that you can get out of the active. You need support to do that, but not with BUEX. You can get it out either by just one attachment or by just an X speed. So I think that this card is okay. It has potential, but right now, from what I've actually seen in actual games, it seemed terrible. So I'll meet in the middle and put it in C tier. Then we got the fossil cards. These are really weird. Um, Also, the tier list is someone else's tier list. It just has all the trainers. They have uh, Old Amber twice because wait, is that what it's called? The Amber card? Yeah, Old Amber. So oh, and if you don't know how these work, they are colorless they're trainers, but when you put them into play, they're items specifically, but then they become 40 HP basic colorless Pokemon. They cannot retreat and can be discarded from play, though. They can act as pivots, and theoretically, they can be like walls if your opponent's not hitting for very much, which can be a thing in the early game. Are these good? Like, would you play these in generic decks? Not really. Some people do like them, but they're not that good. And then also, this one, I'm not going to rank both of the Ambers because they're the same card. They're like actually the same card. It's really weird what Pokemon's done with it. But I think the Amber's the best one because it can evolve into a colorless attacker, which means you can threaten your opponent's board if you're playing, uh, like, say, Psychic, right? If you're playing Psychic, the other Pokemon, Aerodactyl EX, is fighting, but still Aerodactyl. It also has an ability that does something, and is a stage 1. The other two evolutions are stage 2s. The Omastar is going to be water, and then Kabutops is also fighting just like Aerodactyl EX. And so you're not threatening your opponent at all by playing these down if you are just playing a Mewtwo deck. But regardless, I think this one would be situational. Put it in the bottom of C tier, and then I'll put the others two in bad. They're not like unplayable if you want to play them for the evolutions. I'm not really familiar with them. Like I know what they do, the Kabutops and the Omastar, they're like disruptive style attackers. Omastar, I guess, could be really good against certain Pokemon if it sets up. And Kabutops, I think Kabutops is worse, so I'll put it there. I don't think Kabutops really has much potential. Actually, I think this card's quite bad, but I think it's better than F tier. You can play it if you want, and there is some value there. But Old Amber is playable. The other two are quite bad. Overall trainers, there are some really good ones. These ones in these top 7 are really good. You should be considering them in every single deck that you're making. I mean, you don't need to consider Leaf in every deck if your Pokemon are all one retreat. But outside of that, you should really be considering all of them. And then these B tier supported or B tier specific trainers are kind of insane in the decks that they're in, but they're obviously not in every deck. These situational ones are the ones that are more interesting, and then the ones below them I would not recommend. Outside of Lieutenant Surge, I guess is like kind of good, but it is super specific. But anyways, tell me down below what your favorite and least favorite trainers are in the game to play with. Which ones you'd recommend that I try in different ways that I haven't necessarily done before or other people try. But I hope you enjoyed. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, all that good stuff. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.